Hello, so I am Lindsay Hallam. I have written a book about Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, and I am here today talking to Scott Ryan, who has also written a book about Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. So we're going to have a conversation about the film, obviously, and mostly just going to be asking Scott a lot of questions. So I've been very privileged to have read the book before it's out. So I have pages of notes and things that I want to talk
Ooh,
about.
I'm so
Yeah.
excited. And I just want to say that I like to think you and I are the only two people who have ever written books about Firewalk with Me. Do you know if that's true or not?
No, there is a book that came out here in, do I have it? Oh, but there is another book on Fire Walk with Me from a British series, and I cannot find it. It's my bookshelf, and I'm looking at
So
things.
then there's no other book than you and me. It is proven now. If it's not on her shelf, there is not. This is Lindsay's book right here, which I'm on blur, so I think I have to touch it to my face. There you go.
Yep.
There's Lindsay's book, which I love. I read on a plane. The best way you can read this book is I read it on the plane back from the Twin Peaks UK Fest back in the day.
Mhm.
And I couldn't, I read the whole thing. It's a long flight, and I didn't want to go to sleep because I was enjoying the book so much.
Oh, that's good. And were you reading it and going, yeah, I know this, or that's
No,
what
no,
you
no,
always
no.
worry about when you read it, when you write something about Twin Peaks.
Right,
You're writing usually for people who know it as much as you do.
right.
So that's always the worry, I think. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I can say that I didn't fear that much in my book because my book is a little more personal, and I didn't I because I had read so much, I guess I sort of like really tried to stay away from it, which is why sometimes I think you're only the third person in the world to read this book at this point, and I just don't know if people are going to hate it because it really isn't what I think you expect. But maybe, I don't know, you read it. Was it what you expected? I don't know.
Well, that's the thing, is that one of the things that, like, when you start the book, you kind of mention, all the things that the book isn't going to be. And you
Right.
kind of acknowledge, that there has been so much that's been written and discussed about the film. So you tell us what your book isn't. Can you tell us what your book is? And why are you writing it now? Because obviously it's such a personal film for you. What was the spark that kind of made you realize it was now?
Well, the crazy thing is that for all that I've done with Twin Peaks over the last 32 years, I've not written a Twin Peaks book, which seems ridiculous. This is my eighth book now that I've written, and none of them are about Twin Peaks. And it was mostly because exactly what you said is a lot of times when I read a Twin Peaks book, I always think, well, this wasn't anything new, or, this is the same thing. And I didn't want to do that. But when the 30th anniversary was coming out, I felt it was like the time. And in this book, I feel like I'm a little more honest about how much that movie really affected me. And up to now, maybe I didn't want to be so honest about it because I do think that there are sections of Twin Peaks that are fun and you can get into. You might be able to debate about what the Red Room's about or what part eight's about. And you've mentioned it in your book, because I was just going through your book this morning because I think I read it in 20, I don't know, 17, 2018, whenever that UK Fest was. You talk about how you feel Firewalk with Me more than anything else. And I think that's true. I mean, how do you feel about Firewalk with Me? What do you feel?
I mean, it's weird because I just recently was asked to be on this panel. It was an online thing for this horror studies group that's part of this like British academic, I don't know, thing. And they asked me, and I was with these other panelists who have done books for the series Devil's Advocates that my Firewalk with Me book is part of. And we had to do a whole spiel, and I realized, and as I was talking, I basically was just talking about how Twin Peaks, everything that I do now is because of picking up the pilot episode of Twin Peaks on a video shelf back, years after it had been on television, so no one was really talking about it anymore. And I remember Fire Walk with Me coming out on video, and it was rated R in Australia, which is different to your R in that it's kind of like your NC-17, where if you are under 18, it is like illegal for you to watch it. And my mom knew that there was no way that I was not going to watch Fire Walk with Me. So it came out, and it must have been like a year or so after. It wasn't 92. It must have been 93 or 94 that it finally came out on video in Australia. And so I was talking about it at this horror panel, and all I was talking about was how personal it was to me, but yet I shied away from that in my book. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, I watched it the first time I watched it. So I got my mom to get it out for me because I must have been like 14 or 15 years old.
Oh my goodness.
So I remember when I first watched it, I remember like watching it and thinking, wow, Laura's 17. Imagine what it's like to be 17. They're seniors in high school. And so I was younger than all the characters. And so, I discovered The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer in a secondhand bookshelf, because again, it was years after. So, the popularity had gone. So everyone who bought The Secret Diary had now taken it to the secondhand bookshop and got rid of it, which is where I found it, and which is where I found the Dale Cooper book. So I was like so late to the party, because I remember when the show was on, I remember it being on, but it was after my bedtime. Like I still kind of had a bedtime or yeah.
Right.
And so I kind of remember it all happening. So for me, it was this thing that I've grown up with. And so, it just becomes so much a part of you. So when you watch Fire with Me, like, I don't know about you, but the more I watch the film, the harder Laura's death scene becomes. Mm. It's like, it's actually not something you get desensitized to.
No, you really never do.
No, it actually becomes almost more just sad. And maybe as I've got older, because now I'm like, I'm probably older now than Dale Cooper in the show. So I started off being, younger, and now I'm much older. And
now you're watching it and thinking, I could date Del Midler. Why not?
Yeah. All the perks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Maybe.
Yeah. But yeah, I know. But as you get older, to be serious.
Of course.
Yeah. As you get older, the more you look back. Like I always find myself like at the end of just saying, oh, poor Laura, oh God. And I haven't had children, so I don't know what that's like, but now I'm certainly old enough to be Laura.
Yeah, having children is actually worse than the train car scene. Thanks for that setup. I appreciate that. My children appreciate it. But so that really was it for me, that it was the 30th, and I love it more than I love The Return, more than I love the original series. For me, Fire Walk with Me is the pinnacle of Lynch and everything. And I was like, I just want to do a tribute to it, but I want to filter it. I actually wanted to call it a film memoir. Because to me, that's what the book kind of is. Yes, it's about the film, but it also, you get little stages from my life and how I've carried Twin Peaks with me since I was in college.
In fact, on that, it's interesting. It reminds me, there's this amazing book by Kiela Janice called House of Psychotic Women. Again, I will look, and it probably will not. There it is. House of Psychotic Women by Kiela Janice. It is all about Kiela Janice. She's a filmmaker. She just made a documentary about folk horror, which is amazing. But this is kind of like her life story through the horror films, especially films about psychotic women, and how it resonates with her life. So I think it's definitely a really kind of interesting new area. That's the only other example, your book and that are the only examples that I can think of that really interweave the film with personal experience?
Well, and because I wanted to show how one of the things I love to say is that Twin Peaks happens when you don't watch Twin Peaks. And I think that happens because you think about it and you see it in different places. And so I wanted to bring that up. And I almost put on the front cover a film memoir, but then I thought, oh, it doesn't mean anything. And just put a picture of Cheryl Lee and everyone will be fine.
Mm. But then it's interesting that you talk about, because you had the experience of being there when it came out, or you're watching the show when it first came out, and then going to see it at the cinema. And you, so, I mean, I said, I talked about how I discovered Twin Peaks and it was a completely solitary thing. Were you part of a fan community when it was on? Like, when the people that you saw it with, were they into it?
So, I mean, I wouldn't call it a film community like the way it is now, or fan community, but I was in college and everyone who I went to school with was watching Twin Peaks. So you would go to school and meet up, in a bookstore or the library, and people were talking about Twin Peaks. So in that sense, it was, but it's not like now where you really can talk to a bunch of people. I mean, for the most part, I thought I was the only one who truly cared by the end of the series. And when I went to see it, when I went to see Fire Walk with Me, I went with my small group of friends, but we ended up talking with everyone else who was there because they were all Twin Peaks fans, and you could realize other people liked it. And everyone across the board hated the film. Everyone hated it. They just hated it. I mean, everyone was disappointed but me. But I didn't say that I liked it. Like, I would not voice it out loud because I almost felt there was something wrong with me that I liked it, because it is a beating. You know what I mean? It's a lot to take. It's hard to say Firewalk with Me is my favorite film. Like, what kind of sicko are you? But it wasn't that. It was just that I knew there was something there. It affected me in such a way that I knew I wanted to see it again. There was something bigger to me than Twin Peaks.
Yeah. And so, I mean, did you have a sense of how much it was hated beyond just your group? Like, that it was kind of a worldwide.
Yeah, I
hatred?
really did. I used to clip every article. I would look, you'd have to go to the library and I would read like the New York Times and things like that to read about it before and after. And that also happened to me when I was watching season 2. And those horrible episodes that now everybody makes fun of, to me, they were heartbreaking because I could just see like the ratings dip. I used to read the USA Today and check the ratings, and Twin Peaks was always like in the low 70s, high 80s. I mean, out of 100 shows. And I just knew it was going to die. And it was like such a sad thing for me. So I wanted to write about that. That's why it kind of takes like 2 chapters before you even get to the movie, because I'm afraid people forget. Like you said, when you saw it, it existed. But like, I didn't know there was going to be a Fire Walk with Me. I really thought episode 29 was the end of it forever. And I wanted to kind of talk about that moment, because even now, I personally don't think there'll ever be a season 4. But people have hope for season 4 or whatever. But let's say there is a season 4 in 5 years. The people who watch the end of season 3, they won't be struggling with what year is this, because they know they can go on and watch season 4. And there is a difference in that time when you're waiting for Twin Peaks.
I mean, that's one of the things that's kind of mind-blowing, is in your interview with Greg Feinberg, when he talks about that it was like within a day, the film got greenlit.
Yeah, I never heard that in my entire life. I feel like that is a breaking news in this story, in this book. Had you ever heard that before?
No, because I remember writing my book. It was like trying to chart like the month that the series ended, and then within a few months they were kind of shooting. But yeah, I did not realize it was that quick.
Yeah,
And
he
yeah,
according to him, the day it was canceled, the next day the film was greenlit by noon. He says because he
yeah.
came up with this idea, and it was such a great story, and I didn't even know to ask it because I didn't know it. And he just said, "Do you want to hear the story of how Firewalk with Me started?" And I was like, "That's why we're here." And he tells this amazing story.
But what point, when that was greenlit, did they have any idea that they were greenlighting a prequel?
They did not. They
Yeah,
thought they were green lighting the continuation of Twin
yeah.
Peaks. And I think, you know, I think one of the things I like about the way that I do books is I don't interject when
Mm,
people talk. It's their words, but I think if you read between the lines of what he's saying, um, you can sort of feel the hostility that was there in this idea
mm.
between David and Mark. I think even Greg is unsure of the idea, and that could be why the film gets panned in the end. But I don't know.
Maybe there was some. I'd also, yeah, Carl McLaughlin was already kind of going off at some of the actors. So yeah, maybe there was a bit of, I don't know, sentiment maybe within the industry. I don't know, but
Yeah, I think there was.
yeah. But then it also makes you think that, I mean, it's well known that Lynch was, his interest in it was waning in the second season, and I wonder sometimes if it was because he was wanting to go to Laura. He wanted to go to before what was happening in the series. I don't know whether how long it was kind of percolating in his mind that it was going to be a prequel.
Right, but also remember that it was canceled
Hmm.
in May, but they stopped shooting in March. So while because there's some time. So Lynch would have had some time to think about it. So it's not like the day that he wrote episode
Yeah, yeah,
29, the
yeah,
next day he's greenlit this other film. There's actually 3 months in between
yeah,
that.
yeah. And I guess he's sowing the seeds in that finale episode, in that final episode, because he went so far off the script that they
Right.
had initially intended to shoot. And that brings me to a really great point that you make that I really love about Firewalk with Me being the meanwhile. Because she says, I'll see you in 25 years, which everyone goes, okay, well, that's almost planting the seed for the return. But meanwhile, and then we get the meanwhile. I'm just wondering how you came up with that, or that is.
um, if so, thank you for asking me that question because I also love that concept too. And I think I came up with it in while I was writing that very paragraph. Because I was thinking about how fascinating it is because Lynch does direct, and pretty much I think it's known now that he also improv'd episode 29, but it's still filled with cliffhangers. So he's directing those cliffhangers. He knows that Leo's dangling with that string and spider, and Audrey's blown up in the bank and all these things. But all he really cares about is Laura Palmer. That's all he really wants to go. And so what does that meanwhile? So he says, I'll see you in 25 years, which as I point out, everybody talks about that being season 3, but in reality it has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with Cooper's dream.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why she's saying 25 years, because that's 25 years later. Now it does become 25 years later in the return, but when he's writing that line, he's not thinking about that. But then he says, meanwhile, and it's basically, look at me. I'm Laura Palmer. I'm frozen here. Meanwhile, take a look at me. And so I like the idea that just pause for a second and let's take a look at Laura Palmer, and then we'll go to the 25 years later and we'll find out what happened with the rest of them, which we never find out what happened anyway. He still doesn't continue the
And so you were right. You came up with that as you were writing. How often does that happen in your writing? That do you plan?
I really
Or
don't.
no?
I really don't plan. And in fact, this book changed so much from what I was going to start with. I wrote it completely out of order. Like the first chapter I wrote is the chapter about the subtitles and how. So when you saw it, I was curious because you said you saw it in Australia first. So did you have subtitles or no subtitles?
We had subtitles in Australia.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I had recently learned that in England, there were no subtitles. And I found this interesting. So that's actually where the book started. That's the first thing I wrote was that chapter. And then I was like, oh, I guess I got to go back and start this book. And then I just sort of started from there, saying what the book wasn't going to be. And I sort of made up those first two chapters just in thinking about it. If I wrote the book on a different day, they would be different.
Yeah, it's just interesting, and just going back to that subtitles thing, because I knew about the UK having subtitles for years, and I was trying to think how I knew, and then I realized that, so when I started getting into Twin Peaks, no one I knew was into it, and then I met someone kind of like first year of university who was really into Twin Peaks. And I had a crush on him for about 5 seconds, and then realized I was not his type in any way. But he lent me issues of Wrapped in Plastic, because they're just getting that in Perth in Western Australia that didn't really happen. That it wasn't available, and to get it you'd need a credit card, and
right.
But I remember him lending them to me, and I remember photocopying them at the library. Sorry if John Thorne's actually reading, but I didn't pay for Wrapped in Plastic. I didn't have the means, and I photocopied. But then he also lent me this like VHS tape that he had someone he also knew. I don't even know. Like, yeah, he was from the UK, so he'd come over from the UK. He had this VHS tape that was like a compilation of some Twin Peaks fan somewhere in the world had taped a whole bunch of stuff. Like on this VHS, there were the Log Lady introductions, the Georgia coffee commercials, some interviews with David Lynch on Jay Leno, any kind of like Entertainment Tonight kind of segments announcing the film. And it had obviously been passed from person to person. You know, when you VHS, you tape to tape, and each generation. Right. And so like when I was watching it, it was like a fuzzy mess. But of course, I taped to tape it. I set up 2 VHS videos, and I taped to tape. And I remember on this video, there was a segment which was a film review of Barry Norman, who I now know was this really well-known film critic in the UK. And he mentions in his review that there were no. He mentioned, and it was this again. It was this very scathing review, and his. I remember his like flippant comment of like, there's this scene where the music's so loud you don't even know what's going on. And so I think that was when I must have asked my friend about it as well. But yeah, so I knew for years. So I'm so surprised that you didn't know.
Well, one thing in America, we always had it. I mean, so you are outside of America, so you're going to be more apt to hear what happened. Like in America, we don't even know there's other countries. We just assume that it's us and the rest of the world is ocean that we can dump plastic in. So we have no interest in that. So no, I had never heard that before. And the interesting thing is I never really did get to the bottom of why that happened in Europe. And it's interesting that in Australia it didn't happen. And so were you surprised though that you were in the book? Because I have a comment.
I was like, oh my God, I don't even remember writing that. But well, I didn't. And then I thought about it. I was like, actually, I do remember you posting about that. But yeah,
nobody knows. All those people, they don't know they're in the book, which I think is sort of like a fun thing. And I'm like, oh, if I was like, I always like to give some surprises in books and not tell things, but I'm like, I should tell those people so those lazy son of a guns will buy the book. But I don't do that because I want people to be like, what the heck, I'm in this. But so I got a lot of different people's social media posts about it.
Because it must have been, that's the other thing, is I thought, because then there's the Mary Sweeney interview, where she is obviously really upset.
I know, isn't that interesting? She gets very upset with me for realsies. In fact, she does not answer my emails anymore.
But she says like David should not know about this. He'd be really
Right.
upset. And for some reason, I always thought that David Lynch knew, and I thought it was because I was looking again another book. It's the Lynch on Lynch book edited by Chris Rodley, and Chris Rodley asks him, was it always your idea to subtitle that sequence? And David Lynch says yes. And then Chris Rodley says, I thought it might have been some stupid distributor's idea. And then David Lynch goes, no, it was my stupid idea. But then for some reason, I thought that question was a reference, because I can't remember if Chris Rodley is actually British. Possibly he is. So maybe that's why he asks that question.
But I don't think he told him, well, here's the thing.
Yeah.
They weren't on there. And Mary does say that she actually worked on the subtitles herself for the French version, that she translated it herself. I talked to Dwayne Dunham. This is not in the book, for a different interview that I actually haven't even printed yet, but about it, because he of course did the first subtitles ever, because he's editing the pilot where they did it, and to try to get to this idea of where the subtitles came from. And he also said that Lynch wanted subtitles. It was always a thing that David Lynch wanted. In the Red Room, you have subtitles. So it's not a mistake or by any chance, but I think it's a mistake that they never put them on. And crazily, they never put them on to 2014 in England. And I think that's crazy.
Because I remember I saw, it was a few years ago now. It was just after I moved here in 2013, and I saw it because it was a cinema screening. I was like, I think I had never seen it in the cinema by that point. And it was here in London, and it didn't have the subtitles. And I remember being really annoyed by it, because it was like, why? Yeah, I don't know if it couldn't have been before 2014. I don't know. But it's still, not long ago, the cinemas in the UK were not putting the subtitles on, which is very...
Well, I'm assuming that any 35 millimeter print in England would not have subtitles. Yes, I actually would love to see it one time without subtitles, just because I think it would be interesting.
It's just frustrating. But then you kind of know what they're saying, but you also know that there's really important information that you need to know in that scene. You need to know Jacques telling them, Teresa was phoned up and asking about your fathers and stuff. So it's like you actually really need to know information in there anyway. Another kind of main thing about the book is not just this personal element, but also almost like a love letter to Cheryl Lee, or a testimony to her greatness in this role. You almost say that it's almost not Laura, it's Cheryl Lee that you're really that's really moved you and really kind of cemented that connection that you have to the film. And I guess so many people talk about when she was making this film about how deep she went, and people were concerned about where she was going and was she ever going to kind of come back from it. And she mentions in your interview, and I've heard her mention it before, about how when you're acting something, your mind might know it's pretend, but your body doesn't, so your body is going through it. I'm just wondering, like, when you're talking to her about it, how do you kind of navigate that? You don't want to re-traumatize her, or is it asking her to go back to that place? Or...
Well, I will tell you, boy, there's so many ways I could answer that question. The first time I met Cheryl was strangely on Twin Peaks Day in 2018. It was actually February 24th, which is a very strange coincidence. She obviously had no idea it was Twin Peaks Day, but I'm freaking out that I'm meeting Laura Palmer for the first time on February 24th. And we had such a great interview. That interview is in issue 8 of the Blue Rose. And she cried during the interview. I cried during the interview. She got angry in the interview, and I remember her slamming the table at being so angry that women are still abused and the film didn't change anything. And, you could just see the fire and passion that she went through and how much it hurts her physically and emotionally, hurts her that portrayal had to become what it's become to women, so it is hard. But then I would say, when we did it for this one thing is, we've strangely, would never say that we're friends, but we're friendly. I mean, she knows who I am, and we've met several times, and we have a relationship. So it was a different experience. And I didn't feel that I could get her to share as much this time, because I feel like, also, I know her now, which is why I called the book Your Laura Disappeared, because throughout the years, my Laura has really disappeared and become Cheryl Lee, who I just think is an incredible artist, just someone who has given more than an actor should have to give for just this small little movie. We love Fire Walk with Me, but in the realm of movies, it's a nothing. I mean, it's just this little blip, and all that she gave, I'll never get over it. And every time I watch it, I'm so moved by her, even more so than Laura's journey, because Laura's pain isn't real. There's no Laura Palmer. Don't tell anyone. But Cheryl Lee is real, and I do think she has PTSD in some ways of creating this character and going through. And I don't know. It is emotional to have that discussion with her.
But I think there's something about her portrayal. I agree with you. That is the greatest performance ever. It really is. But I guess because you people talk a lot about, it's kind of well known that so many survivors have come to her. And I remember reading, there was an article that when a lot of the Twin Peaks actors went over to Australia, it was back when I lived in Australia, but it was in the eastern states, so I could go. And they were in this article, they were talking about, they had the Q&A and whatever. And then after the Q&A, I guess the actors were kind of there. And there was this young woman who just was kind of shaking. And Cheryl Lee kind of saw her and kind of took her aside. And obviously they went in the corner and they had a conversation. And it was obviously not a light conversation.
Right.
And I think you can, that must have been, that's obviously been happening to her for 30 years. Well, and if you're an empath, which I think she obviously is, you're taking that on. It must be.
Well, I have been fortunate to travel a little bit with Cheryl at different events. And my wife, Jen, has helped Cheryl through the day, work the table and things like that. And we've seen that happen every time, where she takes someone and they go off to the side, and, we don't want to guess what that conversation is about, but I'm pretty sure we know what that conversation is about. And Cheryl gives that person 100% of her attention and cares so much. So the next morning, one of my jobs was to mic Cheryl Lee up at this event, which is ridiculous. And so I'm there and I said, Cheryl, I saw you take care of someone yesterday. And I'm like, Sherilyn Fenn doesn't have to do that. Kyle MacLachlan doesn't have to do that, but you've had to do that for years. And, you're so kind to them, and she turned it right around to me and said, well, you must be a kind person to notice that. And thank you for noticing. And she doesn't want that from you. You know what I mean? Like, she pushes it off. She will not take that compliment. And I've tried to give it to her many times, but it actually wore on me all day. I mean, I probably got emotional 3 or 4 times every time watching someone see her. And it's not like meeting Beyonce and somebody's crying because, oh my God, put a ring on it. It's not that. Like, they are having this emotional connection, and she's taking that on. And she could say, screw you, I made this movie, move on. And she doesn't. She's that great of a human being.
I mean, that's something, the fact that you have this you're friendly with her, her, is something that most of us fans don't have that. We don't know the actors, the people behind any of the characters in Phoenix. Like I love like Twin Peaks, it's my thing. I've never met. I for some reason I have a thing where I don't know if I could pay to meet someone. I feel like it's a really weird, awkward situation. I wouldn't know what to say. And for them, what's probably a completely disposable moment that they're never going to remember. If it goes wrong for me, it's going to be kind of devastating. And my anxiety just goes through the roof. So it's just weird. Like I've gone to a few Twin Peaks things. I've never met anyone.
When we were at the UK Fest, you didn't go up and meet whoever was there. I don't remember who the guests were the year.
No, well, it's expensive as well. Like the money is always a bit of an issue, but it's. Oh. I remember Dana Ashbrook walked by, and I was like, "Oh, Silver Fox, yeah." Like, he just walked. I didn't say anything to him. I probably just looked at him really weirdly, and he just. But yeah, although.
That's so, first of all, I love this discussion so much. Well, I mean, I am very fortunate, and I feel like, I do spend a chapter sort of talking about this before the interview, and I struggled with it. And I mean, I know you're not gonna bust me out on it if I didn't do it, but I didn't want any fan to think, look at this guy talking about he's friends with Sheryl Lee, because that is not my point of it. But I do think I wanted to speak to anyone who maybe thinks they can't get from where they are to where they want to be in any way. That is, it doesn't have to be Twin Peaks. It could be sports or whatever, starting your own business. Nobody was farther away from Sheryl Lee than me in little Maslin, Ohio, at this one, the smallest theater in the world, one screen theater. I didn't think seeing that movie, I'm gonna go to lunch with her someday. I mean, that's ridiculous. But if I can do it, anyone in the world can do it. Whatever your dream is, it can be achieved. It might take 30 years, but you can do it.
I mean, I have spoken to David Lynch for like a couple of minutes, but it was at it was in Manchester. So that's not far from here, from London, and he had an exhibition in Manchester, and I went up to it, and I spent I came up there like, I'm ready to spend, and I just bought the books and the T-shirts and the tote bags and everything, and they also had a event where he was going to be from Skype, through Skype, and it was a TM event. Because obviously he's not going to talk, he's going to talk about TM. Right. But I actually practice TM, and it's actually helped massively with my anxiety. And so the people running it kind of said beforehand that if you have a question, you could send your question in, and if they liked it, they would choose you to ask the question. So I put in the question about, it was about how he uses TM to kind of cope with anxiety, but also in terms of creativity, the kind of anxiety about your creations. Mm-hmm. And I got an email back saying, your question has been selected. And I was like, and then I got there and they go, oh yeah, you're first. And so, oh God. And then, and like, I was like reading the question, trying to memorize it, because I always get so flustered if I try and kind of freestyle it or whatever. And I went up there and I said the question. I remember at first I went up there and I kind of went, hi. And in my mind, I was about to say, hi, David Lynch. And then immediately in my mind, I was going, don't call someone by their full name. So just on the spot, I was saying, hi, David. In a really weird way. It's an awful way. And then I asked the question, and then my soul left my body and I can't really remember what he said. And I do remember, because I was saying, and then I do remember he said, you just got to keep on keeping on. There so that's all I remember.
And what else do you need to know?
Yeah. But I wish I hadn't just been like, I'm going to memorize the question and say the question. I should have it's probably my only time in my life that I'm going to talk to him. I should have just broke down and cried and said I loved him. Done it. But yeah, so that's my one
Hey,
That's
that's a
my
pretty good one, though. That's David Lynch. I mean, that's the top. I have seen
yeah.
David Lynch walk by me, but I've never conversed with him.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd see him in the flesh. I probably would. I'd just do something embarrassing. That's just all I can think of. You
I'm
know?
actually, well, I've interviewed a lot of people over the years,
Mm.
so I'm not nervous at all anymore. But even when I first started, I haven't really been nervous. The one time I was nervous was Piper Laurie.
Mm.
I interviewed her, and I think it's really the worst interview I ever did because I was so respectful of her. Because I just kept thinking, that's Piper Laurie. And it wasn't that long ago. It actually, the interview was in The Women of Lynch, issue 7,
Mm.
which I think you're in too. But I was too respectful. And I was like, yeah, you don't do that, because part of the way I interview people is just try to be so loose and fun that they end up telling me things that maybe they don't want to.
Because I've seen you singing show tunes with Ray Wise.
I can always act like an ass. That's like the easiest thing for me to do.
But then going back to the film, and you've got, at the center of the film, the series is so broad. We get this whole, in terms of the scope, we get this whole town. But I always say that Fire Walk with Me is like the flip side. It's the underbelly, like the series is Cooper's vision of like a heavenly, like slice of Americana, and Fire Walk with Me is Laura's Twin Peaks, which is
right,
almost like hell. But it's also so internal, and it's really about the family and this house.
right.
And so you've got Ray, you've got Leland, and you've got Sarah. And it's interesting that, reading interviews with Ray Wise, he often will talk about, I'm not playing Bob, I'm playing Leland.
Right.
And it almost seems like I don't know, is it like, can he even confront, or he obviously must, just that other side of Leland, because I think in the series you could almost say Leland gets let off the hook. Like,
right.
it's Bob, it's something else. It's this other entity that takes him over, and he has his death scene where he's kind of almost absolved. I don't think the film lets him off the hook. I think we see Leland, and for Laura, eventually it was Leland that she was seeing. And there's also the murder of Teresa
Banks.
Teresa Banks. And there's an interview in The Blue Rose with Jennifer Lynch where she talks about that, and she says the reason you see Leland in that scene is because that was what Teresa was seeing, was Leland. She had no reason to see Bob. So I'm just wondering, like, when you've talked to Ray Wise, or do you get a sense from him that he kind of went to that place with Leland, or is he still kind of, maybe, I guess that's the whole thing, you can't judge the characters that you play.
Well, Ray Wise 100% does not believe in Bob. He doesn't consider Bob, and he makes a really great point. I don't remember if this is in my book or if it's in The Blue Rose, where he said, look, when I'm doing those scenes and I'm looking in the mirror, I see me back.
Yeah.
I don't see Frank Silva. Frank Silva isn't really there. It's me. So to him, he doesn't consider that it's Frank Silva or Bob or any of that. He just solely says that Leland was that hollowed out of a human being and got to that point. In the end, he does feel that Laura redeems him, but he still has to suffer the consequences of what he did. There is no letting Leland off in Ray Wise's mind of saying it's someone else. I actually find it fascinating that we don't see Bob in the Teresa Banks murder. I think that is really, David Lynch would never answer any question, but if I could ask him one, out of all the million questions, it probably would be that, because it's an interesting thing. Like, why don't we see Bob? Even though when he's killing Laura, it's going back and forth, back and forth.
But I think, yeah, what Jennifer Lynch was saying was that, I guess, in Laura's not in that scene with Teresa and Leland, so it's what Teresa is. It's more we're seeing.
Right, but Maddie sees
Yeah.
Bob, Sarah sees Bob, so it's not just Laura who saw Bob.
But then Maddie had visions of Bob before she was killed as well.
Right, because they say the gifted and the damned. So I guess poor Teresa Banks isn't gifted nor damned. She's average. That's what we've learned. Teresa Banks is average. But this is the problem with me, is that I love to make Twin Peaks jokes and I can't help it.
That's all right. And so the other part of this kind of trio in this house is Sarah. And I find Sarah such a fascinating character. There's this kind of dichotomy there that she's present, but she's absent. She's almost not there. And and there's that amazing speech she gives in that extra, Between Two Worlds, where it's got the three of them with David Lynch, and they kind of talk to them as themselves and then talk to them in their characters. And I remember Grace Zabriskie as Sarah, she's talking in that kind of speech about basically, I'm invisible. It's kind of, it's almost like, I guess she's not, I guess also just, can't confront what's actually happening in the home. And then I think about the Sarah that we see in The Return, who's gone to a really bad place. And I'm just wondering what you think of Sarah, especially in the film.
Well, you know what I think is really fascinating? Grace Zabriskie is hardly in Firewalk with Me. I mean, hardly at all. Like, all of her good scenes are in The Missing Pieces. She's almost completely excised from the film. And I did an interview, Grace, for the book. And I mean, I certainly would have if I had easy access to her, but I really didn't know what to ask her about, honestly, because she doesn't have much to do in Firewalk with Me. And maybe that's part of the point, that she is invisible. What's interesting about the Between Two Worlds that you brought up is that Lynch wrote all that. I thought, in watching it, it seems like the actors are improvising it, but Ray Wise told me, no, that was scripted. David Lynch wrote everything they said.
Yeah.
And they had to say it. So it is sort of a clue to what Lynch was thinking about when he was writing The Return for Sarah's character. I don't have an opinion on who Sarah is in The Return, whether she always had Judy in her or not, or evil in her, or whether it took place after. I don't know. I don't know how you could say for sure either way. I feel like there's no definitive clue that you can point to. And I'm sure right now 8 million Twin Peaks fans are going, but what about? But I'm saying that David Lynch really puts in, you can have theories about things, but I do think Sarah is a wild card in that way. But if you just take it from Firewalk with Me, if that's all you take is, you ignore everything else, then exactly what you said is what it is. She's a mother who is basically turning a blind eye to what's happening in her own house, which I think is unfortunately what happens a lot of time in the case of incest.
Yeah. But this like the absence is like, all you see of her is those ashtrays spilling over with cigarettes, which is like, someone's not in a good, happy and settled if they're chain smoking like that. but I always think in terms of Sarah in The Return, I always was thinking that she's the only one who really knows what's going on. I think she knows that things are falling apart and things are going out of balance, which is why she's always, whenever she's there, there's things looping over and over. Like, she's the only one that it's aware that it's actually happening. Everyone else is kind of, anyway. It's my theory.
No, I like it.
Probably wrong.
I like it. Well, first of all, that's the thing. You can't be wrong. That's why Lynch doesn't tell you anything.
Yeah.
Because it's for you to feel however you want to feel. I'm just saying, for me, I don't have a strong theory. for Sarah's part in the return, one way or the other. But I don't think she was evil in the series. Like, it's really hard for me to say that she was always Judy.
No. And again, it's kind of things like, that the perpetrator is Leland. And it's almost like if she was evil, then it's almost like saying, again, it's kind of shifting it from the father to the mother, almost like blame the mother, which is no good.
No.
All right. To change the tack completely, how did Sondheim and Twin Peaks become all twisted up in your mind?
And it's funny what you're bringing up, because I've been telling Jen, who's the only other person I can talk to about the book, I'm like, I should cut this thing about Sondheim in the book. Like, a real writer or a real publisher would say, look, this doesn't belong here. But the reason that I justify it being in there is because I had the conversation with Julie Cruz about it. And so it does I pull it in, but it's a hard pull. I'm grabbing the book and I'm getting this in there. But also I wanted to show how much Twin Peaks is a part of me, in that I can even see it outside in the other art that I connect to. But I quote, every book I do a Sondheim lyric in the front of the book that connects to the book. And in this book, I wanted to do, in the meanwhile, there are mouths to be kissed before mouths to be fed, because of Laura saying, meanwhile. And I thought it was interesting that here is this other woman who's, thinking about experiencing a wide life before she has to live a small life, made me think of Laura Palmer. But then when I interviewed Julie Cruz, I found out that she sang the very song that I was going to use on Broadway, and she compared a different song to it, and it's Every Day a Little Death. And obviously that is perfect for Laura Palmer, because every day was a little death for Laura. She's getting closer to death. That's that whole movie is pulling us. We know how it's going to end. So I do have, I indulge myself a 3 pages, I don't know, 2.5, 3 pages, where I combine these Sondheim songs and how, to me, they speak about Laura Palmer, just because the two things I love most in the world are Sondheim and Twin Peaks.
Yeah. And I guess sadly, it is very resonant now that you're mentioning Sondheim.
Well, and I wrote that before he died, and then I did go to print after he died, and I could have changed tenses or I could have done things, but I was like, you know what, I'm not doing it. I wrote it before, I'm just leaving it be.
Yeah. And also, I guess, to talk about there's just a car outside, sorry. The research that we went through, one of your chapters is where you try and kind of unravel all the different scripts. Like, there was the very first draft that was all Coop, no Blue Rose, and then there was the shooting script, obviously, after Kyle MacLachlan said no. So how mind-melting was it to, like, and also thinking about what's in the film, what's in the scripts, what's in the missing pieces, what's in the return? How did you?
So
how did that all work?
First of all, I'm loving this interview because you're really hitting on the things that I feel like should be hit on, except that Sondheim thing, because I'm a little guilty about it. But so no doubt that was the hardest thing I ever wrote in my entire life. I worked so hard on that chapter. And when people probably think about whatever writing is, I'm talking like 6 months of work. And I'm a pretty quick writer because I have a lot of things going on. I had to keep going back to it. And like the Philip Jeffries section of that, there came a point where I didn't know if it was English anymore. Like, I couldn't read the words. I didn't know what they were saying. Luckily, I sent it to Mary Hutter, who's a big Twin Peaks fan, and Brad Payne, who's a big Twin Peaks fan. And I made them read that to say, does it even make sense? Because I'm uncovering things that are very complex, but you really have to know the movie, but I've got to communicate it to an average reader and a hardcore reader, but I don't know. It was really hard. Did you ever read it and think, what the fuck is he talking about? Or did I write it in English?
Yeah. It was interesting because I had read the shooting script because, again, going back to Perth, Western Australia, growing up, and it was in the lean days of like the late 90s, kind of just before the internet and way after the show had been popular. And I can't remember if it was a record store or a comic book store that I bought the shooting script, but it was just like a bunch of loose papers and like a plastic sleeve. Like, do you know how, and you talk about how when you first got it, how did this script get out there? Do you know like who?
I don't know. I don't know, but it just got passed around. And it's funny that you bought it because buying it had to be highly illegal. Like someone definitely bootlegged that and was making money off it. I got mine, which was again why this is a memoir as well. Like I tell a ridiculous story about how I got this. And I didn't know I was going to tell that story in the book. That's the time when I just am writing and I remembered it. And so I wrote that story because it's again how I carry Twin Peaks with me wherever I go. But I'm glad that you could understand it because it's complex. Like, and it's why the film has troubles, I think, because there were problems in the script because of them changing from Cooper to Chris Isaac, what can I think of his name? Oh, Chet Desmond, back, then putting Cooper back in, like with all those things that caused an issue. And I think it lasted all the way up to editing where they really weren't sure what they were going to do.
Yeah. And so going that first script draft written for Coop, I've not read that. What if they made that script? What do you think the film would be like if they had, you've read it? What were you seeing in your mind as you were reading it? Was it a good film?
I guess not. I mean, I guess it really wasn't because it, like I say, which was fascinating to me, it was something I figured out towards the end, the difference between the Cooper script and the Chet Desmond script is something like 6 or 7 pages total, which is nothing in a movie. I mean, that is nothing, especially in a David Lynch movie, but it's all the difference in the world to the world of Twin Peaks. All the mystery really came in that second draft, and so much of it changes again to what he really shot, or at least what they edited out. I mean, part of what I break through in a complex thing is when they were making decisions in editing that they had filmed something and now he wants to change it, which a lot of filmmakers do. And you bring an actor in and they loop dialogue over while they're on someone else. And those are the things that I'm bringing out in there. And I'm pretty sure I'm correct, but I don't know if Lynch fans will be mad at me because I do basically say he made a mistake and that mistake lives on in all of Twin Peaks. But what are you going to do?
And you also have some controversial opinions about the missing pieces, meaning being almost like, I don't know, better than the return or meaning more to you than the return. So what was it like when you finally watched the missing pieces?
Oh my gosh. One of the greatest days of my life. I was then working in corporate America. And I took a half day to be home for my mail to come. And everybody was like, why are you taking off today? And I'm like, I have to go sit by my mailbox and wait for Twin Peaks to come that I've been waiting for 25 years for. And it just blew me away. I couldn't believe that there were scenes with Pete. I didn't know that. I didn't know about the Josie scene, which I guess is the Pete scene. And like, there were certain scenes we did know about, but not all that stuff. I had no idea it was going to be that great. And to me, that was Twin Peaks coming back. Like in my lifetime, I will always feel like the missing pieces was Twin Peaks coming back. Um, whether it becomes controversial or not,
Mm.
I don't think we ever returned to Twin Peaks. I personally don't think Twin Peaks came back. I think the title Twin Peaks: The Return is a very ironic title. And it doesn't mean I don't like it, but you don't get Agent Cooper, you
Mm.
don't get Laura Palmer, you don't get Sheriff Truman. So when did we go back to Twin Peaks? I mean, like, those are the stars of Twin Peaks. Like, I've got this great idea. Let's bring Seinfeld back. I don't want to have Seinfeld in it. I don't want to have Kramer. Let's not have Elaine, but it's going to be a lot of Newman. I mean, I don't know that that would be Seinfeld: The Return. So that is sort of what I said. And because I was a little concerned, I did reach out to other Twin Peaks people to get their opinion on what it was like to go back. It's interesting because I think you just said I liked the missing pieces better than the return. And I don't think I say that in the book, but I've
No.
never considered it. Do I like the missing pieces better than the return? I'll have to think about that. I don't know which one I liked better, but I felt like the nostalgic returning to Twin Peaks was much more emotional and rewarding in the missing pieces versus the return, which is like a great David Lynch movie, but it is not a return to Twin Peaks. Want to argue?
I love The Return. It's.
But is it a return to Twin Peaks? I didn't say I didn't love
I
it.
don't think we ever were. I think, yeah, I almost knew that it was gonna have to be some kind of spanner in the works than us just getting exactly what we wanted. Because I remember again, early days of the internet, there being online petitions to get the missing, like they weren't called the missing pieces then, those scenes released. So it was incredible when you finally got them, because I guess because we knew they existed, and so for years, and like you say, we get them, and it's them when at that age that they were,
right,
and it's this still pretty much the same kind of tone, especially in those scenes. It's almost like the series. And then the return, yeah, like you say, is a David Lynch movie. It's the late stage David Lynch, the Inland Empire David Lynch. Yeah. So it's definitely, I think it is, the return is definitely, I guess, the work of someone. And it's all about, I guess, getting old and impending death and thinking of and not being able to ever reclaim what's already gone, or
right.
I won't go too much into it, but there's a lot going on in the return that I could talk about for a long time, but
obviously so could we have a freaking magazine about it, but I mean, but I am not saying, I'm going on record as saying, I'm not saying I don't like The Return. I'm saying it's a great David Lynch movie.
Yeah.
I just would not, I so wish it didn't have Twin Peaks in the title. That's what I would say.
Interesting. Yeah. So you definitely don't think we'll call it season 3, because there's the whole.
I know, like, that is another running joke. Like, did you laugh when you read the book? Because I feel like I have some great jokes in this book. And one of them is the naming things. Like, we don't know what to name anything in Twin Peaks. There's so many trouble. And I don't think it's season 3 of Twin Peaks. I mean, I really don't.
I've never thought of it as season 3. I think it is something else. Like you say, it isn't really Twin Peaks. It is something else. And you mentioned, I mean, I remember when I was writing the book, such a headache. The one-armed man, or do I call him Philip Gerard, or do I call him Mike? Do I capitalize Mike? Do I capitalize Bob? Is he Killer Bob?
Right.
Is it Partyland? Is it The Power and the Glory? Is it in Canada, or is it out the back of the roadhouse? Like, there's just, it was, I remember, I mean, especially the one-armed man. I ended up doing the OAM because, I'm not going to write out the one-armed man or the man from another place a million times.
Right.
But
you did.
how
I put a thing in the front of the book that says, these are initials that are going to be. And the other one that got me is the room above the convenience store, because you can't
Yeah.
just call it the convenience store, because that's not what it is. It's the room
Yeah.
above the convenience
Yeah.
store. And that got annoying as hell. So I started calling
Yeah.
that TRMCO, whatever it is, who knows?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I'm not putting, that's, my book would be 10 pages longer if I had to type all that
Yeah.
out. And I actually pay for the books to be printed. So that money comes out of me. So I do a lot of abbreviating, but you never know what to call anything.
Mm. Because it's so, what I found so strange was in the script, they refer to the one-armed man as Philip Gerard. So he's not the one-armed man and he's not Mike. But that just really threw me off.
Well, and we live in such weird times. There was part of me that I'm like, oh my gosh, we're calling him the one-armed man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what could be worse in 2022
Yeah, true.
than like you're picking out someone's physicalness and that's what their name is. But the thing is, he's the one-armed man. That's what everybody calls him. I mean, when I interviewed Al Strobel, he called him the one-armed man. And I think even when I was interviewing Al, I said the one-armed man. And I'm like, oh, good. Can I say that to him? But I mean, what are you going to call these people?
Yeah. And then one of the things as I was going on, like the whole thing about whether to capitalize Mike and Bob, I think that originates, the capitalization, I think, originates from The Secret Diary.
Right.
I think Laura capitalizes Bob. She never mentions Mike in the diary. No. But yeah, that's just a headache.
No, it is horrible, and all you can do is try to be consistent. And then I had the same trouble with the Pink Room, because David Bushman is my editor, and I guess with Chicago style, you never capitalize the. So he wanted it to be lowercase, the Pink Room, but I'm like, but it's the Pink Room. That is part of the title, and even in the song is the Pink Room. And so I guess when I said the Pink Room scene, we compromised that I wouldn't capitalize the, but like all that stuff is so stupid.
I know, but you gotta go through. And then like, I think partway through, I think I started capitalizing Mike and Bob, and then partway through, I thought no. And then I had to go back through the whole entire thing, the whole entire manuscript, and yeah,
it's horrible.
Why do we do this?
And there's just someone out there that doesn't care that we work for a year on this book. They're just waiting to bust our hump because we called it not the Pink Room or the Man from Another Place. They're like, he's actually a tree now, so shouldn't it be the Tree from Another Place? And
yes,
hard. But that's why we love Twin Peaks, because people care.
Yeah. And another great thing about your book is the interviews that you get. So we should talk about the interviews. Well, we could start off with the interview that you didn't get, Angelo Badalamenti.
Yeah. I was close though.
What question were you most excited to ask him?
Boy. I had 20. I had 20 questions. So he said yes. He said, send me the questions. And I mean, they were great questions. Like, they were in-depth questions, but a lot of them were about the use of instruments. So I find it fascinating that the theme from Fire Walk with Me, there's a trumpet version and a sax version. And the question that I wanted to ask him is, what is a trumpet to you and what is a saxophone to you? Why did one have one and one have the other, and what do they mean? Is one more sexy? Is one more sad? And I really wanted to know that. But also, there was just a ton of songs. Like, how did he do it? He just had the greatest moment of his career with Twin Peaks. And then, like we said, the movie's greenlit a day later, and they're like, I need a complete new score. Like, how is he not like, are you kidding me? But he makes that bar and then some. I mean, the music of, as much as I love the film, I love the score even more. I mean, I think that score is unbelievable.
And I guess he would have also, it's the same place, but tonally so different.
Right.
And the music has to reflect that. Yeah, he's amazing. And then Ron Garcia. So I think I remember there's a really great interview that he did, I think for American Cinematographer magazine back in like 92. That's the only other kind of big interview that I'd ever really read with Ron Garcia talking about Twin Peaks. And it's interesting with the interview with you, his memory of all the technical things, like the film stock was this blah blah ISO and the lighting, I don't know
Right.
all the lingo. But yeah, he still remembers.
I know, and he's like 80 or something, and he told me at first, look, I'm not going to remember very much. And I said, that's okay, we'll just get the feeling. And then he remembered everything. I thought, what the hell did he forget if this is what all he can remember? But we talked for hours, multiple times. I would even almost say we became friends. Like he's a really good guy. We've talked a bunch. He was moved by being asked. Like, I don't think he understands how important we know he is. Like, I don't know if he feels it. And I tried to explain to him because he was like, is anyone going to care about this? And I'm like, oh my gosh, they're going to eat this up. Like, you're giving us so much and we want this. He hasn't been Sabrina-fied, which is what I like to say, where Sabrina Sutherland is like, don't tell anyone. You know, he's happy to tell. And so you really get stories that I've never heard before. And I think you learn a lot.
Yeah. As I remember, I think the first time where I really kind of heard about, that there was a conscious effort throughout the film for there to be that angel and that angel's presence and perspective was, I think, that first interview. So he's, and people talk about Lynch the auteur. He's a visionary and everything's his vision, but nothing's going to show up on screen if Ron Garcia isn't there to do it. So
right. Well,
yeah.
and it's interesting how much Ron did on his own. One of my favorite shots in all of Fire Walk with Me is at the end of the Pink Room when the camera goes across that floor and there's cigarettes and it's horrible. That's Ron Garcia. He said, can I stay late? I want to get a shot. And he set that shot up and got it. That's amazing. There's so much that he brought to it.
And the reason that it's the Pink Room, I remember reading that he, in between, like almost the bricks on the wall, the caulking, he made that pink. Like just the little details, it's someone has to do that. Someone has to come up with I guess Lynch, he's known for talking in abstracts, and the cinematographer is the one that has to actually
make it happen.
Interpret, that the technicalities of putting that vision on screen. It's he's so vital to why we love the show. And
just amazingly talented. It was an honor to get to talk to him, and it was a fun interview because I came up with the idea, instead of asking him questions, I sent him pictures. And so he looks at a still frame from the film, and then we just talked about it, what he remembered. And I think that's why he could be so technical, because he was looking at it and he could tell what lighting he had done. And I had made the decision that I wasn't going to dumb it down. Like, and I sort of argued with my editor about this, because he was like, well, shouldn't you explain what that is? And I was like, no, because one thing is, I don't know what it is. And when you read it, you didn't know what it is, but someone out there knows what it is. And it's good for someone who wants to maybe be a DP. This is a good interview for you. You're going to learn about craft, because I think we live in a time where people think it's easy to do something, but everything is a craft. And I think even when you don't understand what he's talking about, you get that he worked he worked really hard and he knows what he's doing.
And even that the still, and he talks about the really close up of Laura's eyes, and you see the two dots, and it's like, that's the two lights. And you're like,
I know. I've seen that a million times, because that is I love that scene. I mean, that scene is incredible. And I learned something from talking to him. I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah. And it's something that, in contrast to kind of Ron Garcia was very this very technical details. And then with Mary Sweeney, it felt like, I mean, you could tell, it's obvious why her and Lynch kind of got along in every way possible. Because the way she was talking was very like Lynch, she was talking about the emotions and the feelings. It just seems it was just reminiscent to me of how Lynch talks about the process. And it's kind of crazy that was the first film that she was like the editor.
I
Like
know.
yeah.
It's just nuts.
It's,
It's unbelievable.
and it's kind of like, well, to an extent, kind of like Cheryl Lee. I mean, obviously Mary Sweeney had a lot more experience than Cheryl Lee does. But the whole idea of just someone like the first thing where you're like carrying it or in charge is this huge mammoth thing. And I think editors are like the unsung heroes of cinema. I think it's
Well, of course. I mean, in a different interview that I did recently with Joel Bacco, I just came up with something I'd never thought of before, that what would the return have looked like if Mary Sweeney had edited it? And it's an interesting thing to think about, like, because I do think what you learn from her is she does edit from emotion, and the return is much colder than Firewalk with Me. Firewalk with Me is very raw, and I think Mary has that. And I love strong women. I always have. I love to debate with a strong woman, because I feel like they see things differently, and that's who I want to talk to. And I love how much Mary argued with me. And it was one of my favorite interviews I ever did, because she didn't just, I couldn't steamroll her with some question. And that makes the greatest interview.
Yeah. Well, I was interesting to hear that she's a professor now. See, I mean, I'm in the same job.
Yeah.
One professor, but she's used to students. A lot of students coming in thinking that they know everything. She's going to school them, so I'm sure she gets it a lot. But yeah, I mean, I want to take her class. That'd be amazing.
It would be. I will say that for the most part, I don't deal much in regrets in life. But for the rest of my life, I will regret not having 10 more minutes with Mary Sweeney. I mean, she had a heart out, so we only had an hour. And the first 25 minutes of our interview, she had her walls up. I don't think I had gotten to her. But man, the last 10 to 15 minutes, she was wide open. And if I would have had 10 minutes more, I don't know what I would have gotten from her, but it would have been amazing. Her interview really moves me. Yeah. I love it. To me, it's the best interview in the book.
Yeah. It gives you so much insight. It's almost like, it does feel like her and Cheryl Lee, it's like these two forces, and the film is kind of because of them, and the kind of interplay, front of and behind the camera. It's something's going on between them. I think. Yeah. And so towards the end of the book, you get really personal. And I was really moved, reading it and thinking, and it makes me think, and I think I'm sure most people who read the book will be the Twin Peaks fans. And so everyone, I think, reading that is gonna think themselves about how Twin Peaks, kind of saved them or made them. I always say I'm doing what I do now. I teach film. I try and make films a bit, but I mostly write about films and teach. And I bring up David Lynch and Twin Peaks all the time in my teaching, because I teach students who want to be filmmakers, and so they're more into the practical stuff. So I always find myself, using what David Lynch has done to help people, I guess, learn. But yeah, it's all because I picked up that pilot episode off the video shelf. It's just, yeah, and it was there from so much of my life now. Yeah, it's just, I mean, was it difficult kind of putting all that in the book?
Of course it was. I mean, do you know how much I want to rip those pages out of the book? And, you know, at the most, especially like publicly, I'm a comedian. And in the Twin Peaks world, like I go on Twin Peaks Unwrapped and act like a jackass, and I sing show tunes with Ray Wise. And I like that persona out. But on the flip side, I knew that if you're going to do a book about Fire Walk with Me, it is a very serious subject. And I understand why Laura Palmer is this hero to women who have been sexually abused. But that isn't what she represents to me. Mm-hmm. And even in my interviews with Cheryl, like I've tried to broach it, but it's like a dangerous thing to talk about. But I feel like Laura can inspire you in other ways as well. And I sort of wanted to reclaim a little bit of that. But yeah, I mean, I wish that wasn't in the book, but I knew I had to do it because, you know, you're really laying yourself out there.
Yeah. But by you doing that, like I said, it made me think a lot about myself and my relationship with the show and with the film, which feels really deep. And I think you just say one point, the whole thing with, you know, what the film means to you, but what Charlize's performance means to you is that whole, you say something about putting on the smile while dying inside. And yeah, and even if you don't share Laura's specific reason for doing that, I think so many people, I mean, I've talked a lot about the anxiety that I feel, you know, every day, every moment. I think that's why I love horror films so much, because I don't know, it's almost like my fears are justified by watching a horror film, or it kind of accurately shows what life is like. But yeah, it's like, you know, whether it's because of what Laura's going through, or just anxiety, depression, trauma, but even just societal pressures, financial pressures, this whole thing of we all are made to put on a smile, even, you know, right, when we're dying inside. And in some ways, it's something, as I got older, it's actually much harder to stop putting on that smile than just continuing on and letting it kill you. And you talk, yeah, don't you think, like, you talk about that turning point for you where you were in the job and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because there was a long period of my life where I really did struggle with depression. And during that period, this movie meant everything to me. I mean, there aren't very many movies that have the happy ending where you get to die. The happy ending is you die. And when you are being drawn to that kind of art, you know, you're not where you want to be. It doesn't mean that I don't appreciate the movie in the same way, but for so long, I wasn't doing what I was here to do. And that's a hard place to be. And Laura has always been that sort of beacon to me. But, you know, it's just not in my nature to talk about those things. But also, I think like it was time, and, you know, I don't know, it makes me uncomfortable because I'm a Gen X person and we're supposed to, like, you know, be cool and nothing gets to us and all of those things. But I think people will probably be surprised. But also I want to be sure that the Cheryl interview lands as it should, like how far I had to come to get to there. And again, it's not about saying, well, I'm there and you're not. It's saying, I don't know where you are, but you don't have to stay there. That's what I hope a reader can get from that. Because honestly, if I can do it, anyone in the world can do it.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I took from it. And it was making me reflect a lot. And I think that's what I think everyone is going to take from it is, yeah, this film means something to all of us, because, you know, often in some ways, you know, especially like in really kind of niche fan cultures, people become so possessive and like gatekeepers. Like, you don't like this enough, or I liked the film when it first came out, and now
Right.
you're saying you liked it, and or you said, yeah, you know, you said this, you know, this character says this in that scene. Well, actually, they say that in that scene, and you know, it can get so. I mean, that's always something like when I first discovered Twin Peaks, it was something that no one else around me, like I don't even know why I got so into it. And I had to, well, maybe because I had to work for it, because I saw it all out of order, because I had to go around and find video libraries around Perth, trying to find all the
Right.
bits. And I saw it all out of order, and yeah. And yeah, you know, it was always something that was my personal thing. And when I started to meet people who liked it, it was almost a bit like I always didn't want to give it up, or
No, I feel
yeah.
the same way because, you know, I've had the Fire Walk with Me poster, which is right there, with me my whole life. And when I met all these people, which really happened to me, I think in 2015, I went to the Twin Peaks Festival. It might have been 2014, I forget now, but, and then that world sort of got wide to me. It was crazy. I also thought no one cared but me. You know, I just wish I would have been writing about this stuff all that time when I was so alone and my life was so small. Um, and that was the other thing about sort of talking about that, because if people see me and they're like, oh, he does the Blue Rose, of course he knows, you know, whatever, Amy Shields or something. Like, no, it doesn't happen that way. I mean, I'm trying to get an interview with Patricia Arquette right now because I want to do a Lost Highway thing, and it's going to be impossible. Like, you never make over that hump. It's still always hard because we're outside of the world. So I think we have that bond together. You know, I just think you're like the greatest. I like your personality. I think you're so sweet. You know, like you're doing a great job. You're sharing. And then you just said, I don't know why I like Twin Peaks. Well, I do, because I think you have to be this certain kind of person to think about something. In Twin Peaks, it's not right there. What Twin Peaks is about is one spot over. So you have to think about someone else to enjoy Twin Peaks. That means you and I could always be friends because you like Twin Peaks and I know you're going to be a thoughtful person. And that's why I think all of us get along, because it's not like watching, I don't know, Friends or something that anyone can watch. Like, Friends is right there in front of you. You don't have to spend any time thinking. I don't know. That's probably a long answer to whatever.
But you've answered your own question as to, you know, you shouldn't feel bad about being personal in your book, because
Oh no, I should still feel bad about that, because my nature to not share those things in the world. I'm just here to make people laugh, not I would never tell my real feelings. That's gross.
But I don't know, if there's one thing that Twin Peaks fans, I think, can understand, is this idea of duality.
That's
Maybe.
true. Oh, look at her go.
Yeah. But no, I mean, it's a really amazing book, and I think what really stood out to me, because as you say right at the beginning, there's so many things that have been written about this film and the series and David Lynch, that I think what sets it apart is this personal aspect. And it's always also been quite inspiring to me that I could maybe do that myself, or that we all could. We all love the show. It all means something to us, and all our stories will be completely different.
And I think that's totally true. I actually think that is 100% true. And I had this idea for a long time that I don't think I'm going to do, so I'll share it. You can steal it from me. But I wanted to do a thing about calling it Twin Peaks fans, and you could have a play on the word with the fan and the fan, and capturing everyone's story. because I do think it's really interesting. I mean, Courtney kind of does that,
Yeah.
Laura's Ghost, but it's so much about Laura specific, where the journey to Twin Peaks for all of us is a fascinating story.
Yeah. And I guess on that note, you mentioned Blue Rose. What's happening with that?
Well, thanks for asking. Today we are announcing that this is going to be the cover of the Blue Rose. Hopefully it showed up.
Yes.
Hopefully people can see this. So this is issue 16 of the Blue Rose. We're doing 16 and 17. This is the cover. It has a reason for why those people are on there, which is a little game for people to try to figure out, but it's going to focus on the 5th anniversary of the return and the 30th anniversary of Firewalk with Me. John Thorne's writing an essay about memories and how they play in both ways. I interviewed Sabrina Sutherland about the return, and Courtney is doing something about the Snoqualmie Indian tribe. Matt Zoller-Seitz is joining the Blue Rose to write about the legacy of the return. And Matt Marone is doing a thing, a little tongue-in-cheek, on Moira Kelly as Donna. That should be a lot of fun from Firewalk with Me. So go to Blue Rose Mag and you can pre-order issue 16. We're coming back after taking a year off. And
is that the beginning of a new run, or is this kind of a one-off deal? Do you know?
That will be up to you, the listener. So we're doing this as 2 issues, 16 and 17. So 16 will come out in May and 17 will come out this fall. We don't really know what 17 is about, but I kind of spoiled it by saying I'm trying to get Patricia Arquette because I think she would be like such a great interview for issue 17, but probably not going to happen. If people buy it, we'll try to continue. The last couple issues have been rough, but it's all been COVID based, and it's sort of everything's getting expensive. Paper's expensive, printing is expensive, it takes forever. It just depends if people want it. We would like to continue. It's up for the readers to tell us if we should just pack it up like the Entertainment Weekly and fold up or continue on.
Have you ever thought about online? Is there a website type of thing you would be interested in, or?
No. We do a Kindle version, but Amazon keeps the majority of that money, so it's not a money maker to us at all to help offset the printing thing. But I want, like you said, you found Wrapped in Plastic and you wanted to want to photocopy it, and I want it to exist in the world. I think it matters. It's fun to come in the mail, even though I have to do all those labels and stamps and envelopes, and it's a pain. But no, I don't want to do an online thing. If this doesn't work, then I'd love to get to issue 20, so it'd be nice if we could at least make 20 issues, but as long as people are interested, we will continue to do it.
And I guess we should wrap it up.
Yeah.
There. Yeah.
So.
Oh, goodness. We've been talking for a bit.
I know, but it was such a great talk.
I know. Yeah.
There's the cover of Firewalk with Me, Your Laura Disappeared. You can go to bluerosemag.com or FayettevilleMafiaPress.com and order a copy. I'm very proud of the book. I'm kind of excited, and thank you for talking to me about it, because you're really the first time like I've had a full out. You're the first person to read it, the whole thing. When I did a couple early interviews, but I only gave them the first 5 chapters because I didn't want it out there, but I knew I could trust you. So thanks for reading it all.
No, I mean, you can tell I had a lot of questions, and I was also worried that I was going to just give it all away, but hopefully that gives people incentive, entices them to read more. There's lots of jokes in there, as you say, that we didn't talk about today. So
yeah, I can't stop Twin Peaks jokes. They're my favorite. And there are definitely moments of, I think I like to say, I will not say this is the best Twin Peaks book, but I will say it's the funniest.
Very, very fair. Yeah.
Well,
All
thank
right.
you so much for doing this, Lindsay. I always love talking to you. I love seeing all that you do. Everyone should get her book as well. It's so different than mine that you can have them both. And I love your book, and I love all the things you do, and I love seeing you on these bonus features, and I feel like I've watched you just grow and sprout wings over the last 5 years that we've known each other, and I just think you're the best.
Oh, thank you. And that's the thing I always talk about. I was always so reluctant about joining any kind of Twin Peaks community, and the first Twin Peaks festival I went to here in London was where I met you and Courtney, and all my fears kind of went after meeting you, and it kind of shows that we all do just love it, and it's the basis of our friendship, and
Of
I
course.
value it very much.
Ah, yes. And, I hope you'll write for the Blue Rose again. And when you get an idea, just let us know. You could be in issue 17 because I got nothing for 17 right now. So
Okay.
think about it
Oh,
and decide and let me know. And thanks everyone for listening. Happy Twin Peaks Day. And hey, we're out of here, right?
Yep, that's it.